from making those same choices, in life, to help them see.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a lot about how people grieve differently. For those who are stuck in that grief, how does that affect them if they're in that same level or severity of grief for a long period of time? What does that do to a person?
So often, when I've worked with people, especially I'll use my experience in suicide, that I've talked to some parents whose children have died by suicide, that they feel like time had paused for at least the first 5 years. And when they kind of woke up, as they say, 5 years later, everyone else had moved on, and everyone else had started to create, even the friends and other family members had kind of started to make those steps of acceptance.
Of healing.
Of healing, yes. Of healing, acceptance, of creating a new life, new routines. And as the parents or the people that were closest to that individual, they're going through all the firsts now, but it's 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And it's a very unique experience for those people closest to the deceased, especially because it's such a sudden way of passing or dying, that it feels very disjointed. And everyone is kind of saying, hey, it's been a long time. It's been 6 years. Why are you still not able to go to that restaurant? Or why are you still not able to drive on this road? Why can't you do that? And they're not understanding that in reality, they were in a fog for that first very large chunk of time, that they were just merely existing. And now that they're starting to come away from that fog and grief is starting to lift just enough to be able to understand the world around them, that they're experiencing it kind of for the first time, like everybody else did, when all the other, extended family and friends went through the first Christmas and the first holidays and birthdays and anniversary dates and things like that. They're now going through that. And so I do think that makes a difference in terms of what we judge or what we deem as holding on too long to their grief. We have to kind of understand that aspect of what they're feeling. But I do think sometimes people don't know how to navigate that because of the taboo nature of talking about either death from an overdose or suicide or something along those lines, that there isn't that societal norm of talking about it, that it's hard to know, how to.
Is it wrong then to, when you see somebody who doesn't seem to be making any type of progress over long periods of time, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it may be, that they still get into they're still in that grief so
drowning
deep, that to say something to them, or how should they progress?
I don't think it's wrong to say something, especially if you care about this person.
Well, that's a big point. If they care about you, they're going to say something to you and say, you got to do something.
Absolutely.
Therapist or whatever it may be, but you got to take steps to move forward.
Well, and we can look at, okay, if a friend was going through that, and I know for me, if I saw that, the first thing I would do is try to meet them where they're at and understand what they're feeling and understand the struggles that they're facing with moving forward, because I'm sure they want to move forward just as much as anybody. They don't want to feel this pain.
Right.
But maybe talking to them about what they're experiencing, what is the barrier to moving forward? What do you feel? And figuring out how you can help them through that. But I think it's the way that we frame it is what's important, because there's a difference between going up to someone and saying, hey, you really got to move on. You just talk about your son too much and you just got to move on. That's not helpful, and that's very unkind. That's very unloving. That's not what we need anytime, frankly, but especially in our grief. But instead saying, hey, I'm noticing that you're still really struggling. How can I help you? How can I get you the right resources? Do you have a support group? Do you know other people who've lost their child in the same way? Let me connect you with people who fully understand your grief, because as much as I love and care about you, I don't understand it because I didn't go through that. And so meeting them where they're at and saying, hey, let me help you through it to create a new life, because you'll never have that old life back.
Right.
because your loved one is dead. You'll never
It's-
have them back.
It's the new
It's a new
normal.
life. It's a
Yeah.
new life that
Yeah.
you can live with them in it in a different way. Because your son is very much in your life. You
Right.
can see it in your
Yeah.
home, you can see it in your life, you can see it in your presence. He's just with you in a new way. And so finding out what that new way looks like is what really we should be looking for.
That can be very scary.
Oh, it's absolutely scary because then it means we have to let go of that person.
Yeah. We are, but we're not.
Right.
You know, now you made a comment that really, and I wrote in my book, addiction, if your loved one is in addiction, you don't ask people what to do who don't understand addiction. That's the wrong place to go because they're going to tell you tough love, and a lot of people don't know what tough love is.
Right.
They shame them, degrade them, whatever it may be,
Boot camp
and they think that's the tough love. You need to talk to somebody who understands addiction, be it support groups, Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, which you've done and I've been through, even addiction centers and so forth. There's a lot out there, and it's probably the same with grief. You got to talk to someone who understands that, and that's, I think, helped us. Unfortunately, because of his method of dying, we met a lot of people that lost a child, and we learned a lot from them. So, yeah.
Right, and I fully believe that, for me, I don't believe that God causes bad things to happen to us, but I really do believe that He allows for other people to come into our lives to help with that healing, and He puts those people in our path for a reason. That you meet all those people that you would never have gotten to meet. Obviously, we wish this didn't happen, but at the end of the day, you get to meet all of these people and help them through their grief, and you, and you can walk this path together.
I mentioned in my book, I said, I met this person and his son had died, and eventually down the road he passed away, this father. For basically 4 or 5 years after his son died, he didn't do anything. He pretty much stayed in his house. The only thing he would do is visit his son's gravesite. And this is my view on this, and back to your point, is that if you don't get out and move about, God can't put people in your life to help.
Yep, that's true.
Because He will put people in your life to help you, but if you don't expose yourself to the outside world, you're not going to get that.
And in the transfers, He can't use you.
He can't.
He can't use you to help other people too, because that's something that you may be able to offer to others. And as you are with the book, with this, all of these things, you can give that to other people going through this, because unfortunately this is an epidemic. This is something that's happening every single day. And so giving that support to people could be part of that new life, that new calling that you have.
Right. I mean, I've shared things that I know have helped people, and people have shared things with me that I know have helped me. So, and my wife and the kids, it's back to your grieving process. Our daughter Rachel, she posts things on Facebook about him on his anniversary and his birthday and stuff like that, where Keith, he grieved, but he's quiet. And but we know Eric is in both their hearts, but they deal with it in a different way. It was interesting because Eric, being a big Beatle fan, when our grandkids have birthdays, Eric, we got some money from his insurance, and we decided on birthdays we give it to the grandkids. We give them a little thing. So we always put a post-it saying "Peace and Love, Uncle Eric." And the first time we did that, when I went to my son's house the next day, he had that post-it on his calendar, "Peace and Love, Uncle Eric." So that was pretty neat. So I mean, you know where his heart's at, but they both handle it in their own way.
Yep, absolutely.
I love that. That's so
so special.
Because you can see, you see people grieve in different ways, and Keith is more quiet about it, but you saw that small gesture that shows that he still thinks about his brother, and they're still connected in that way.
Oh yeah.
Really
Well,
cool.
Eric played hockey, Keith played hockey. Now Keith's sons play hockey, and we go to the games and everything else. for some it may be too difficult, but for us it's remembering them.
It's keeping him alive in a
Keeping
lot of
him
ways,
alive,
because you
yeah.
know if he were here, he would be right there with you,
Oh,
cheering
yeah.
the loudest, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
and being there. And so that's a part of it too, is saying, okay, if I stay in my home and I grieve, I don't get to keep their memory alive. You don't get to be Eric's voice in the stands.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, Eric was a goalie, and you can see his helmet right there. And during Christmas, we have them all down here, and the kids like to play a game of mini sticks. It's hockey with real short plastic sticks. They were all taking turns putting Eric's goalie helmet on, playing
So
mini
special.
sticks.
That's so fun.
It was really cool. It was really awesome. We just we had pictures of them with their face coming out of the mask. Yeah, it was cool.
How special.
Yeah.
So when we do lose a loved one, it can be a grandparent who's lived a full life into their 90s or hundreds, and sometimes parents lose their kids who are maybe in their 20s or 30s. How does that grieving process differ, if there is a difference?
There absolutely is a difference, because there is something called ambiguous loss and anticipatory loss. And for people who have lost a loved one, and I'll use these vague terms of when they should have, you know, obviously none of us know when our time is coming, you know, when our time is up on this earth, but we expect to have our loved ones, you know, our grandparents, you know, until their old age, or our parents until they're old enough. I know for me personally, I lost my mother when I was young. My mother was in her late 50s when she died, and I had not had my children yet. And I know for me, what was particularly painful is when people would say, I know exactly how you feel. I lost my own mother. She was 95 and I was in my 60s. And it's like that. And I don't discount their grief. Their grief is there, and their grief is important. But to say it's the same grief is just simply untrue, because I was not only grieving my relationship with my mother, I was also having some anticipatory grief or some ambiguous loss of what would she have been like with my children? What would my kids have called her? What would be their fun thing to do together? Those types of things are gone, and I won't get to experience that. And that really is a big part of my grief that I experienced personally. And I know many others too, where you might think, well, what would his children have looked like? What would he have, you know, who would he have married? What would that have looked, you know, all of those things that you might be thinking of that you are looking forward to as a parent of seeing of your kids, or that you're looking forward to seeing as a child losing a parent. You look forward to seeing your parents as grandparents,
Right.
Those types of relationships. And so I really do think there is a big difference of that when my grandfather died at 88, there was a lot of grief, of course, because I missed the person that he was. I was sad that I didn't write down enough stories of the family, of his life, all of those things. But at the end of the day, I felt very comfortable with the fact that he was, we believe, in heaven, and his body is healed, and he lived his life. He ran the race, as they say, and he was finished. And he was ready to go. He was ready to, his earthly body was ready. And so the grief was still there, but it was different. And I think that that's where it can feel, I guess, less sudden or less shocking when an older loved one dies, or someone dies, I guess, in the natural progression of their life, in the natural stage of their life, versus a very unnatural loss, like losing a child, losing a baby, losing, you know, a young adult
Right.
in the prime of their life. Those types of things are very different, because there's not only loss for the relationship you had, but loss of the what if, loss of what was supposed to be, and the things that you were entitled to as a parent. You're entitled to see your kiddo grow up and have those memories, or see your kiddo, if that's the choice they make, is becoming a parent and
Right.
getting to hold your grandchild. Like, those are things that you were supposed to get. And so it's that feeling of injustice and that feeling of, this isn't fair. And somebody who loses a parent when they're in their 90s, or when they're at the natural end of their life, they got all of those experiences. They got to have that. And so there is that feeling of unfairness. And I think it really does differ for many people. And to say it's the same just isn't true. It can be bad. Both can be bad. Both can be awful experiences, but they're different because there's different components to them. Definitely.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, just generally speaking, do you have any advice for people who are grieving? Like,
Grieve,
yeah.
feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I often say that you're not helping yourself by not feeling those feelings. It's like if you have a car and the engine light is on, you know you need an oil change and you just keep driving, or you know that your gas light is on and you just keep going because you think, well, if I just ignore it, it'll go away. Well, what's actually going to happen, instead of pulling off into a car shop and getting your oil changed and being on your way, you break down on the side of the road and it's a very expensive fix and your engine blows up, and or you run out of gas on the side of the road and you're stuck. You can't do anything. And it's the same thing goes for mental health in all areas, that taking care of yourself, doing self-care, avoiding burnout, all of those things are important, because if we don't, there's going to be consequences. It's not a matter of if, it's when. And to your point earlier, you want to be there for your other children, for your spouse, to be supportive with your family and friends. You want to be able to do that for them. And so if you do have this grief, feel it, get that support, join support groups, get a therapist, get a hobby that helps, like maybe painting is a great outlet to help let out some of that grief, or whatever it might be, to let out those emotions, because feelings demand to be felt. They're going to be felt. If they're felt in a healthy way or not is up to you.
It's probably not a given, but if you allow yourself to grieve, you should start to see progress of handling life again.
Absolutely.
So if you're not handling life again, then there's something that you really need to go.
And a lot of that probably comes from shame, from guilt that is unnecessary, meaning those parents that might be thinking, I should have done something, it was my responsibility, I should have fixed this, I should never have let them get this far without doing something, when the reality is, we all know it's a disease. People are going to make the choices they make. People are going to, be affected by the disease in different ways. It's not, or it's like you said, it's not your fault. You didn't cause this.
Right.
So there probably is some shame that they're holding on to, and they have to learn to let that go, to accept that, yes, this is what happened.
The day that Eric died, he had been sober for 2 years and 4 months.
Wow.
And he relapsed 3 weeks earlier, so we know he was struggling. We weren't exactly sure what level he was at. Marlene was getting her car repaired, and he texted her and says, you want me to come and pick you up? And she says, no, I'll just wait for the car. So she came home an hour later, somewhere in there, and she found him on this basement floor, and he had died. He had overdosed. And for a period of time, I think she thinks, well, if I would have taken his text and said, yeah, come and get me, this wouldn't have happened. But then we met a lady, and it more than just that, other times it has come up, it says, if it wasn't then, it would have been another time. It just, because he had relapsed and he was going to continue using. So if it wasn't then, it would have been another time. And
Absolutely.
she put that out of her head, and she understood that, hey.
And she didn't.
Because we understood addiction.
And she didn't make the decision knowing that he was going to do that. Like, she
Right.
didn't say, no, don't pick me up because I know this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
She didn't make that decision knowing that. Hindsight can really be a blessing and a curse. That when we look back on an action, you were doing the best you could with what you had in the moment.
Yes.
That's what you had. And so unfortunately, that was the outcome of what happened. But like you said, if it wasn't then, it would have been another time.
Would have been another time.
Are there any last thoughts or anything that I've missed that we want to make sure
No,
that we cover?
I think we covered it pretty good.
Feel good?
And I hope what we shared helps you, or in some manner. As we had a saying in our Al-Anon group, take what you want, leave the rest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so open with your journey and
Thank
for
you.
letting us
And
kinda
thanks for
share.
being here,
Absolutely.
Rachel.
Thank
for
you.
joining
Yeah.
us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so don't forget to maybe pick up or order a copy of this wonderful book. It's really insightful, it's educational, it gives just a raw experience of Eric's life and his addiction, his recovery, the family's recovery, and everything in between. And stay tuned, of course, for more videos to come. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I hope you got something out of those 2 videos that we discussed grief. My next planned videos will be with a certified advanced addiction counselor and an addiction therapist, and hopefully you'll learn something from them about what this substance use disorder, the medical term for addiction, is all about. Look for you soon. Thank you.